think we're live. Welcome to the new episode of All Things Global, powered by Vistatec. It's our episode 13, and I'm your host, Dominika D'Agostino.
I'm your host, Suzanne Frank.
And today we will be talking about ON's blueprint, how to synchronize localization with business objectives. And All Things Global has been created to inspire compelling academic conversations and fresh ideas for people who develop long-term global strategies. We are so excited to have with us today Rosie Robbins, who is the lead consultant and trainer for localization at ON, and Matteo Nonne, lead program manager for localization at ON. Both of them are based out of the UK, so thank you so much for joining us. And I think that ON, as we all know, has been making waves in the athletic shoe and performance sportswear sphere. I think everybody right now is wearing them. You have some amazing marketing featuring Zendaya and Roger Federer. So we're very excited to know what's behind the hood and how do you organize your localization at ON. So before we kick off the actual conversation, let me just mention one housekeeping item. Today's format will be a free-flowing conversation. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the chat box below. We will get to them as best as we can. And with no further ado, over to you, Rosie and Matteo. Hi. So maybe to kick it off, since launching in 2010 as athlete first company, how has the culture at ON changed?
Well, shall I take this one, Matteo? Because I've been around a little bit longer. So I joined ON, I started working with ON back in October 2020, so exactly 4 years ago. And it does feel like longer, possibly because of all the things that have happened in the world. Like at the time we were still in lockdown. But I think also because so much has changed at ON and everything has evolved dramatically since then. All the departments at ON have really grown and evolved since over the time that I've been working with the company, but none more so than localization. Back in October 2020, there was no real localization team or department. We didn't even really use the word localization. It was sort of like translations and the people that do those. We didn't have style guides. We didn't have a TM. There were lots of things that that were very new that we needed to start adopting. And then we also had to grow. We had to kind of scale and grow as well as evolve. So that was really challenging. The website was redesigned during that time. So yeah, it was a great relief when Matteo came on board to properly take a holistic view and a more strategic approach to localization. But to answer your question, actually, how has the startup mentality been maintained, the startup mindset been maintained? I would say that it's still somewhere that has a real openness and flexibility, that there's a sense that you can approach people in all kinds of different teams and disciplines with an idea or a way of working that could be improved, and people are very receptive. There's no kind of, oh, at my last company we did it like this, or that's not my job. It's still as kind of broad-minded and open-minded as it was when I joined, which is very nice.
Yes, I completely agree with everything that Rosie said. I've definitely seen a concerted effort to implement new structures, new processes, new and better organized ways of working. This is a natural response, I think, to the growth that ON is experiencing currently. And, the fact that really we're not able to, quote unquote, wing it anymore. Because it's a lot harder to then course correct. So yeah, the main sort of remainings of the startup mentality are this sort of idea and open-mindedness and trust towards industry experts in our case, it would be localization. People do tend to trust what we say to them and our suggestions. And it's very rare for us to encounter opposition when it comes to suggesting improvements, new approaches, new tools, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's been pretty positive.
Well done, both of you. It sounds very like an exciting time. I've noticed the growth recently has just been imploding. You guys have opened up stores all over the world, and congratulations to On and to you guys as being part of that journey. If you don't mind both backing up a little bit and talking about the career journey that has led you to On and your path that's brought you to this moment.
Sure. Shall I go first?
Yeah, you
Go ahead.
So I have had a bit of a weird checkered career. I did a languages degree in German and Hispanic studies, and then I went into PR, and I spent most of my PR career working at Ogilvy in London, which is most famous as an ad agency, but it also does direct marketing, PR, activation, the full mix. So it was a great way for me to really understand what was the point of what I was doing. It wasn't just to make my clients famous just for the hell of it. It was because it was part of a strategy to do marketing. And what was really drilled into me there was that we don't do anything without a brief, and a brief must always include business objectives, like what is the business context of whatever campaign or approach we were supposed to be implementing and designing, and what is the behavior change we need to drive as a result of it. So who are we talking to? What do they need to do? What do they need to understand to do that? What do they need to feel to do that? So it was a good grounding. But then I sort of decided, well, as I went up the ladder, I actually ended up not really doing the things that I enjoyed the most, which was writing. And so I decided to go back to my roots and become a translator. But then I couldn't really just leave that. I couldn't just get on with that. I couldn't help myself, because I sort of knew too much, because I would be doing a lot of marketing translations. I would be thinking, no, this isn't quite right. And so I started giving talks and doing a few training workshops and things to help translators understand what their marketing clients were looking for, and to help them sort of think, well, it's not really about the words in the source text that you should be focusing on. It's really, what is the intention behind the text that you're translating or transcreating? You need to understand why those words were written. Who are you talking to? What do you want them to do, etc., to be able to do a good job. And so based on that, somebody at On thought, yeah, I think we could use you at On. So so I joined to come on board to sort of help support the localization process, and then ended up doing a bunch of other things. And now I'm back doing more sort of quality focused things.
And I want to hear Matteo's response, but I do want to just contribute this. It's rare that somebody has that business acumen, brand experience, marketing experience, plus a translator experience. So that's a rare combination. So I'm sure they appreciate that in you, Rosie. Matteo.
Yes, I've had a very different career path compared to Rosie's. Perhaps the only thing that we have in common is that we both did a language degree. In my case, it was being Italian, native Italian. In my case, it was English, Spanish, and French. And after university, I went down one of the more traditional routes for language graduates in the translation project management field. So I started agency side, so working for a translation agency or a language service provider. And I was there for about 6 to 7 years. And there I really learned the basics of project management, processes, documentation, and all the like. After my time there, I realized I wanted a bit of a broader, more holistic view and figure out how localization could actually help organizations expand globally, especially to non-English speaking markets. And that's when I started moving on to the so-called client side, joining 2 tech companies, one after the other. And more specifically, I joined existing localization teams there. So I didn't necessarily have to build anything from zero, which gave me the chance to learn the ropes and understand how organizations operated, where localization fit in the bigger picture, and what I could do to sort of champion it and make it work behind the scenes. On was really the next logical step for me, because although it wasn't a matter of building something from zero, as Rosie had been there already and she had implemented a few things, a few improvements, that they never really had a full-time person looking after localization. So it was a matter of looking at it from a full-time employee perspective, and I guess a slightly stronger presence, if you will, just because I was there to annoy people all the time, really. And yes, so that from there it's just been an experience of building from the ground up. But I think the fact that we work so well, Rosie and I, is due to the fact that we have such different backgrounds and we sort of complement each other in our in our specialties and also the roles that we've naturally fallen into. So while I might look after more the day-to-day execution, as well as the process improvements, the overall strategy and efficiencies, including integrations, automations, etc. Rosie looks more after, like she mentioned, the quality aspect, the team building, so recruiting the right teams to execute the work, and finding out the best ways to champion localization across the business.
Yeah, so it seems that between the 2 of you, it's truly a dream team with a lot of different skills and building blocks. And I know, Matteo, that we also interacted in the previous company you were in, so it was very interesting to kind of see, the progression of your journey, and also the fact that, yeah, here you could build something completely from scratch, it seems. And it also coincided with the explosion, right, for On and how people were perceiving it already. So I think based on your journeys, you can kind of intuit a little bit, but where does localization actually sit within your organization? Is it marketing? Is it product? And how do you think that makes you successful, but also, perhaps what are some of the challenges with that setup?
Yes, we do sit within the global marketing team. Maybe we can start from the challenges. Let's start with positives first. One thing that sitting within the marketing team has helped us achieve is developing a clear understanding of why we do what we do, why we're localizing, or why we are translating, adapting a certain text. That in turn gives us the ability to brief our linguistic teams appropriately and make sure that they have all the means that they need to actually execute the work. And in terms of context as well, it's a little bit easier for us to access everything that we need, not just in terms of information related to the brief, but also any visual context, any background, anything that we might need depending on the request or on the task. As part of the marketing team, considering how big marketing currently is at On, we do have the opportunity to also put ourselves out there a little bit more. And well, I guess we could talk about the evangelization, as some people like to call it, of localization within a business. People know who we are, and it's helpful to take us into account for the requests for the projects. It's very rare that we are forgotten about and only added to projects at the very end. in return, what we try to guarantee is flexibility and understanding of challenges and needs of each team member or each team, so that we can be a bit more solution oriented and adjust our way of working, our MO, to meet these requirements and to try and avoid bottlenecks as much as we can. The last thing I would add, and it's definitely not the least, is the fact that the marketing team at On is very multinational, very multicultural, and there's a lot of people that speak a lot of different languages, and as such, they have a good understanding of the importance of localization within an international business. So it's relatively easy for us to sell the need for it.
Any tips? This is just an add-on to what Domi asked you, Matteo. For those of the people sitting out there struggling to evangelize localization with their organization, and I know you guys have a little different story because it sounds like they're very open to it going into it. Are there any, like a couple things that you would suggest on best approaches to evangelize localization within the organization?
Yes, there's definitely a couple of things that I try to do. One is certainly trying to avoid technical jargon related to localization. Non-industry experts might not be familiar with all the terminology. They will not necessarily know the difference between translation, localization, internationalization, globalization. So I try to avoid using terms, and I'd rather try and paraphrase. Coupled with that, what I was just mentioning, the open-mindedness and understanding why people are asking for certain things and where they are coming from, instead of sticking to my own guns all the time, has definitely made them a lot more open to listening to what I had to say and what I had to what I was suggesting to them, and why perhaps the way my suggestions were better suited to what they needed. And at the same time, it was also a great opportunity for me to learn from them.
Absolutely. Rosie, when you started, was it a different dynamic or similar?
It was similar, because it's always been that way, that localization has always been very much part of the marketing setup, but that relationship is much stronger now. And I think that the work that Matteo has done to kind of get upstream and understand the processes much better to serve the campaign leads, needs, etc., has really been invaluable. And also I think the way that the teams have grown and developed has also really helped. So for example, we now have regional marketing people in place in the target, I think pretty much all of the target markets, which when I first started working with On, they weren't there. So I think, except maybe in the DACH region. So by kind of forming relationships with those regional marketers and giving them an opportunity to review the campaign copy before we publish it, they're also now much more bought into the whole process. And when they have a big launch in their country, they're then sharing it and talking, and celebrating that as a win, which includes the work that the localization team, the linguists, have done. So all of that, I think, helps to generate a better understanding of what localization is, and it is actually really a part of what everybody is trying to do in marketing. That's really helped to sort of raise the visibility of localization.
Absolutely, makes sense. And in addition to that, you guys have in-house creative teams, do you not?
We do, yes.
So how do you kind of ensure that everyone is aligned with your brand vision with all of these, in-house creative teams, out in the field, in-country specialists, or reviewers? How do you kind of make sure everyone's aligned with the brand? What's your strategy there? And that would be for both of you, so we can start with Rosie.
Well, there is the process that we have where we have the regional marketers look at the translated copy, and they're all, of course, native speakers of the target language. So they bring their understanding of the brand and how, because they're internal people, so they have probably a different understanding than maybe a linguist might. So that's a really good way of getting them to look at, you know, how are we talking in other languages? Is it on brand? The other thing, which is maybe not just about brand, it's actually more about, I suppose, strategic marketing goals, is that we work quite closely with the marketing strategists. So they are the ones that even brief the creatives in the first place. So they brief the copywriting and creative team to come up with a campaign. We take their audience insights and audience profiling, and we pass that to all of the linguists as well, so that everybody is working from the same level of context without trying to bombard them and overwhelm them with stuff. We're quite selective with what we present, but that's something that's really, really valuable. So there is basically an understanding and a identification of all of ON's different audiences or communities, so that everybody in each language team, each translator knows exactly who they're talking to when they're writing. And what I mean by that is that each campaign is aimed at different types of community based on, or in each product, in fact, is aimed at different types of athlete or different types of people who move, depending on how intense their relationship is with movement. So people who are hyper competitive tennis players will have a different relationship with tennis apparel and shoes to somebody who really doesn't do much more than, you know, hang around the club looking cool. And those people, they all talk to, they have different aspirations, they have different ambitions when it comes to movement and the sport. They consume different media, they have different influences. So, you know, and they've got different problems, different dreams, different, you know, without sounding too pretentious. So once you know who that is and you understand that behavior and that community that you're talking to, you can build up a sort of portrait in your mind of them. You can go into different forums and you can read what they're saying in your language when you're a translator, and you can really get into their head. You can understand who you're writing for, and that really helps with things like terminology. You know, you don't use the really if you know that that's not a term they use about, you know, what benefit they're looking for in a shoe or a piece of apparel, then you don't use it. But for the other community, you may do. So it helps everybody to understand exactly who they're talking to, and instantly when you say, oh right, this campaign is for this community, everybody's instantly got that shorthand of knowing, you know, who they're speaking to, how we speak to them, etc. So there's so much knowledge and so much really valuable insight that comes from the in-house, the fact that On does in-house creative. It really does benefit the end product of what, you know, the ultimate translation that we're doing. Yeah, I could go on all day about it, actually.
Yeah, no, I see where you're going with that. It's definitely much more of a brand immersion versus sending it off to an agency, which might have some element of brand immersion, but not to the extent that you're suggesting. So that makes total sense. Matteo, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Just expanding on what Rosie said, this is kind of a similar setup that we've tried to build as for our language teams as well, as we saw the benefit too. We've looked for linguists with certain profiles, and we have been able to onboard them and personally educate them on the brand through the years, and made them true On experts. So they're very familiar with the brand, with our messaging, and they make sure they stay abreast with, you know, industry trends, as well as with any updates and new changes that happen within On. So not just out in the world. We also gave them a direct channel of communication, like Rosie mentioned, with the regions, but also with our English copywriting team, so that they have the opportunity to seek clarification whenever they need it, and also better direct the copy to be in line with the overall strategy.
And
So
I think one of the other things that we do is that the copywriting team is divided into different disciplines. So there's editorial specialists, conversion copy or consumer copy specialists, and conceptual specialists. And so we're able to leverage their different expertise and knowledge of their different channels to upskill everybody as well, and to help them understand, you know, what's the best practice for the transcreations, because linguists tend to be more generalist than specialist.
Exactly. Domi, I think you had a question.
yes, well, first of all, a comment that it seems that what is working so well here and where you have been so successful is, you know, kind of focusing on the hyper local, on the communities and the, you know, the different types of customers that you have and the different, of course, lines, and also bringing the whole team together, right? So the local marketeers, agency, independent translators, and so on, under the same roof and working together as a team to contribute to the success. I'm very curious as a follow-up to you know, what are the maybe some of the aspects of the setup that you found challenging? And then I think we will move to the questions from the audience because they are already coming in. Cool. So do you want to, do you have any comments about like what has been a challenge with the current setup, and how do you see that, you know, as the company is growing and of course the number of markets and so on is growing, how are you seeing, you know, that you can tackle that?
Yeah, I think the main challenge for us is an increasing demand for content. You know, with ON's growth, that I think has been pretty apparent in recent years. We need to make sure that we're always we're positioning ourselves well to be able to meet it and to appropriately scale without holding things back. And this is not necessarily a challenge for localization alone, of course, but I think we do tend to be hit a little bit harder just because we are naturally towards the end of the workflow and the process. So yeah, we're approaching launch dates, we're approaching deadlines, and that's why we feel a little bit more. And it's a matter of addressing it by you know, partnering with the right people, the right agencies, Vistatec being one of them, of course, leveraging technology, and yeah, just being agile in general, really. The other big challenge, and I think this is probably a very common one, especially for multilingual organizations, is feedback coming from all angles. And the classic too many cooks in the kitchen effect, where everybody suddenly has an opinion and feels that what we're doing is not good enough, it's not appropriate. And Rosie could probably attest to this. Before I joined, they used to receive a lot more feedback than we do now. But thanks to Rosie's efforts to build this process of, you know, being more attuned with the regional marketing teams, we now receive a lot less of it. But I guess it's the downside of having such an international team that we're part of.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge of marketing in general, is that the feedback now that we get is all subjective. So, and I think that is always the case when you are producing a creative product, and when you start inviting in feedback about something that's creative, then there is always going to be disagreements. The other thing is that marketing naturally has lots of different disciplines and specialisms. So they can come into conflict with each other, like SEO and brand are often opposed to each other. Well, not opposed, but they have different perspectives. So that's part of the challenge. As Matteo says, it does come from different angles, and it's part of the joy of working in marketing as well. It's also because it just is a challenge because there are no guarantees. So yeah.
And there's an element of natural friction for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I do want to encourage the audience, if you have not experienced an On experience in their stores, we had the benefit of going to the one in Soho, England, London, and it's like no other experience. I just want to say that I'm not going to give it away, but I will tell you it is like no other experience. So if you have a chance, do check it out. We do have some questions from the audience that I'd like to ask. We will be as mindful of, the privacy aspect of it, but just, if you could answer the best you can, that'd be great. And I'll let you guys decide who wants to take the question. The first one is, how do you manage the technical aspects of internationalization, ensuring localization readiness for your website and mobile app before user interface is translated? Do you have an in-house internationalization expert and a formal process for that work?
Unfortunately, well, I would love to say that we do have an internationalization expert in-house. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It has largely been a question of learning by doing and failing. When it did happen, especially towards last year, that we had a couple of instances where localization was taken into account, but there were a lot of assumptions taken without involving our team at the right time. And it was a question of fixing and course correcting that then culminated in a series of playbooks, a series of debrief calls, and all the best practices have now been documented, and they are being used not to repeat the same mistakes. I do think it's sometimes the best way to learn, and even though, of course, we would like to prevent every issue from happening, that's not always possible, especially when there's an urge to get things out of the door as soon as possible.
Rosie, anything you want to add to that?
No, fortunately, I stay away from
The technical.
technology a lot more these days.
Understood.
Yeah. There is a second part, right, to this question, and maybe partially you already answered that, Matteo. Do you extend internationalization assessment to the quality of the written content? And is there a formal process to ensure text is localization ready at all?
In terms of including quality in the internationalization process, yes, we do try to champion it as much as we can and to outline all caveats before any work has even started. It's normally a question of me explaining what would happen if we did A versus if we did B. And then ultimately, a lot of the time, if not all the time, is a business decision, what sort of route the team decides to go down. And in terms of formalizing the process for quality of content, Rosie, I don't know if you'd rather answer this as this is something that you've been working on a lot. But yes, we do have something that we're working on.
Yeah, basically, it falls into two rough categories. The work that I do in quality is getting it right first time and managing feedback. And prior to maybe a year ago, I spent pretty much 90%, well, most of the time on getting it right first time rather than the managing the feedback side of things. I mean, because once I had done the getting it right first time work, the feedback naturally started to improve dramatically. It became purely subjective feedback. So it's something that's still evolving, for sure. I think on the internationalization side of the copywriting. I think that people already think, the copywriters already think in quite an internationalized way. So that when we get copy for trans creation, it's already quite ready to be localized, if that makes sense. That it's not that because we don't localize, we don't have local versions of English, the English language site or content. You may disagree with me, but it's most of the copywriters are actually British, but they write in a way that's very international. And I don't think a North American would not notice that it's been written by a Brit. I would wager, but correct me if I'm wrong. So already it's kind of thought of in that way. So I hope that helps answer the question a little bit.
Absolutely, thank you. One other question that came through is, how is On dealing with AI at this point? What are you guys doing? How are you handling that?
Yes, we are. As a company, there's a series of initiatives that are in place. I can't share too many of them, but I guess one of the most prominent ones is the recent launch of a chatbot function on our website. And well, it has the usual chatbot objective, which is to enhance customer experience or user experience and better redirect customers on to ways that meet their expectations and their needs. Specifically to localization, we have started integrating AI in our workflows for a limited range of content types, and always with the human expertise in mind as well. So pairing technology with a human touch, because again, we want to operate with quality at the forefront.
Absolutely, absolutely. So quality over technology, which you don't see that in every company. Some companies just want to know how they can save and use AI, and quality isn't as important. But in this particular case, quality is the priority. And if you can automate and make things easier with AI, then you'll add that to your processes and your workflows. Do I have that correct?
That's correct, yes. That's a good way of summarizing it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's how you build the brand as well, right? And that's what is so different, I guess, about On and how disruptive it is. Do you want to add something to that, Rosie?
No, I think there's so much craftsmanship, and that's really clear in the voice, and that's such a big part of it that it's a tricky one. The human touch is really necessary, and in all of the content that we produce, it's been really important to maintain that level of craft in the voice.
Yeah. But it seems that our audience also has some more questions about your technical setup and just technology. And we realize that you, again, probably cannot reveal, all the details and names. But if you could just describe how, what kind of types of tools are you using to make this program setup happen, that would be very helpful.
Yes, it's probably not going to be the most comprehensive answer because I can't share too much. But we do, of course, make use of a TMS, so a translation management system, as well as integrations between this TMS with some of our content management systems and platforms that we use. That is most of what I can share, unfortunately. Sorry.
That's okay. Is it a continuing moving process? Do you guys have a set process?
Yes, we're always assessing how our integrations are performing and whether the tools that we use are still meeting our needs. So yeah, I would say it's a bit of a yearly reevaluation, and us just coming together and partnering with the technology team to make sure that everybody's still aligned, everybody's still happy with our ways of working.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I know those are questions that have to be cautiously answered. So thank you for that. And we knew they were going to come up, but One question that we got from the audience is, how does On ensure that its in-house creative development remains culturally relevant and adaptable across different regions without losing the essence of the brand? That's a good question. Do you want to start, Rosie?
There's a lot to do with the fact that, as Matteo said earlier, that it is such a multilingual, multinational company, that because it's an English first company, you know, everything is written in English, and everything happens in English. But there are people from every single target market represented very, very strongly. It's not a question of strategy being imposed from some central kind of English speaking location, which is what I think I'm more used to. There's much more of a relationship between markets and HQ, just naturally, I would say.
How about you, Matteo?
Yeah, I would maybe add that we are in very close relationship with the teams that are in charge of establishing what the brand is, what it stands for, and how it communicates. And so we try to align our multi-language guidance to that. So we can be, again, very locally specific while maintaining the overall essence and the overall feel of it.
Sounds good.
Domi has, I think we have another question. I'll let Domi ask. That's quite a good one regarding the KPIs. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one more, and it's funny because we keep oscillating, I feel like, between, you know, marketing and creative questions versus very like technical questions about your setup, which is understandable because I think our audience wants to learn, you know, both sides of the coin. So the questions about KPIs is, how do you measure the success of your localization strategies at On? And what key metrics or KPIs are most important in aligning them with business objectives?
Yes, we use a mixture of KPIs, depending on what's available to us out there. As currently performance across On is monitored as a whole, or with the top, say, 5 markets in mind normally. So that doesn't unfortunately account for all the languages that we operate in. It's also very channel dependent. If we are to monitor the performance of our emails, for instance, we will use certain metrics. If we are monitoring traffic on our website, of course, we'll use slightly different metrics, and so on and so forth. But I'd say the ones that we try to keep an eye on and partner with the analytics teams, as well as the teams responsible for those channels, are conversions, uplifts. I guess traffic is another one. Especially, we've done that exercise recently as we launched one new language this year on our website. And we've done a comparison between when we had the website in English in the market versus when we had it available in the main language for that market. And we've definitely seen a difference there. And then another one that we tend to use is brand awareness and brand perception in different ways. So perception as for instance, performance brand versus a more stylish brand versus even just something as simple as logo recognition.
Yeah, that absolutely sounds great. And I think it's very different for a lot of the audience, you know, in the localization industry, because we are so used to our traditional KPIs, right? Sometimes we see that there is this discrepancy between the language services provider and the client as far as what would genuinely serve them in talking to, you know, their C-suite and promoting localization within the company. So I think, yeah, we are definitely at the forefront of what is happening in that area. Congrats.
I have a question that may be for Rosie. But of course, would love both of you to answer it. Some athletic companies want to be rebellious and edgy. Some want to be the go-to for, I don't know, work. Not all, not in just shoe and sneaker type organizations in general. So I don't mean to say just all athletic companies. What is, if you're able to say, what is the brand goal of On overall, would you say? Where do you fit into that?
Well, it's to ignite the human spirit through movement. And I think that what I've really enjoyed about On is that I'm not an elite runner. I'm actually not really a runner. I do a bit of CrossFit and a bit of yoga, and but I absolutely understand what that means for me. That movement, and it does make you, it makes you feel things. It makes you live your life, enjoy your life, enjoy everything that the world has to offer, more when you can find that connection between the mind and the body. I think it's that really, and it can mean all kinds of things to different people, depending on your situation and your walk of life. And it's done in such a sort of warm and inclusive way that it's a real pleasure. It's a real, it's really nice to work on this.
Yeah, and I think that you guys have done a really good job. I think the story behind how you guys got started is very interesting too, but that might be for another day, and how the shoe was actually created. Matteo, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I would say just adding on to our mission that Rosie just mentioned is just communicating the exact same message across all languages, across all countries, hopefully one day. That's how I see us fitting into the bigger picture within On.
The really interesting thing that I just want to say that is so much aligned with igniting the human experience through movement is when we were in Soho at the flagship store that evening, people that were kind of, I don't know what you want to say, maybe On power users or On fans, were meeting to go for an On run through the city and through the streets of London. And it was just so cool.
I think maybe a comment that, you mentioned the history of the company, Suzanne, and I think that we also see that evolve, right? It was started by free athletes, very professional, or oriented towards professional sports and so on. And I think the kind of new focus is more inclusive, definitely, as you said, Rosie, and involves all of us, right? The lifestyle through movement and through just getting people energized, right? To do all those things to live better. So yeah, very, very excited.
Cool. Very cool. Any other advice, tips, and tricks that you guys have for all of the wonderful localization folks that are sitting on the call with various requirements and concerns and all the same things that you guys are going through? Any tips and tricks to them? We'll start with Matteo.
I would say, I'll just reiterate what I said before in terms of open-mindedness and really try and understand where the people are coming from. In my experience, that is what has taken me further, and that is what has helped me explain why I was doing things the way I was. And I feel like naturally when people feel like they are being listened to and you're acting almost empathetically in the regard, they automatically relax and they are more open to what you have to say. And in a world where we're still seeing localization not being appreciated enough, not being taken into account enough, I think that's paramount, and that's I think already one foot in the door, really, and that applies to all sorts of things, be it AI used to cut corners or things not being done properly to save time, money. The way for people to listen is by speaking the language, I think.
Totally. Rosie?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Matteo said. I think that the soft skills are so important, the listening, the empathy. I think also that a really good question to ask yourself and to ask others is, what is this for? Why are we doing this? And then that helps everybody to develop a shared understanding of stuff.
Yeah, and you had mentioned it earlier, which I thought was really interesting and such an important aspect of communicating with your executive stakeholders. You know, you can't necessarily use the typical localization industry jargon. You might have to say it in a way that they're going to understand it, or in a way that's appealing to their goals and their metrics, or whatever it is that they have to be accountable for. So I thought that was definitely something I think I see in the industry that people need to learn to get further. Like Matteo said, be flexible, speak their language, kind of flow with it, and really learn what they're about and how you can talk to them in a way where they're going to look at you guys in a different way as well, and be more amenable to you guys and what your needs are. Very good. Well, this has been lovely. We can't thank you enough for joining us today. I hope it was useful to our audience. The only thing I want to say as we start to wrap up is that if you need anything localization, of course, Domi and I are always available to have a discussion with you about how we can help you with any type of global content requirements and processes that you may have. So we want to thank everybody for attending the 13th episode of All Things Global, powered by Vistatec. We want to give a big thank you to the Vistatec Marketing Department for always supporting us, and we look forward to episode 14, and we want to thank you again for joining us today.